Every year, the world sells about 6 times more of one honey than actually exists. It's the most valuable honey on the planet, and by the end of this list, you'll understand exactly why anyone bothers faking it. 8 honeys. Let's start at the bottom. Number 8. Clover Honey. Number 8 is Clover Honey, the honey most Americans picture when they hear the word. Pale gold, nearly translucent, with a clean sweetness that finishes fast and doesn't linger. There's a faint grassy note underneath it, but nothing that argues with whatever you put it on. White clover isn't native to North America. European colonists brought it over in the 1600s as pasture forage for livestock, and as farmland spread west across the continent, the clover went with it. The bees followed the crop. What arrived as cattle feed ended up defining the flavor of American honey. In the kitchen, clover is the neutral one. It won't fight your tea or overpower a vinaigrette. It's also what bakers reach for, because honey is hygroscopic, meaning it pulls moisture out of the air and holds onto it. A loaf sweetened with honey stays soft for days longer than one made with sugar alone. Here's what earns it the 8th spot. Volume. Clover is the single most common floral source in American honey production, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture puts domestic output at about 134 million pounds a year, while roughly 3 out of every 4 pounds Americans actually eat are imported. That squeeze bear on your shelf almost certainly crossed an ocean. That's the baseline. The next honey exists only as the byproduct of a completely different business, and that business is disappearing. Number 7. Orange Blossom Honey. Number 7. Orange Blossom Honey. Light amber, and the first thing you notice isn't the taste, it's the smell. Open a jar and there's a soft citrus perfume, closer to the peel than the fruit, followed by a mild floral sweetness that clears quickly. It comes from citrus groves, historically in Florida, along with California, Texas, and Arizona, and it's essentially a side effect. Citrus growers hire commercial beekeepers to haul hives into the groves for the spring bloom, because trees worked by bees set better fruit. The beekeeper gets paid for the pollination itself. The honey is what the bees leave behind once the blossoms drop, and since that bloom only runs a few weeks, the window to collect it is narrow. Orange blossom honey is a finishing honey. Drizzled over ricotta, yogurt, or a citrus dessert, it holds its aroma. Cook it hard and the volatile compounds that make it interesting burn straight off, so it belongs at the end of a recipe rather than the beginning. What earns it a spot is that it's vanishing. Since citrus greening disease was first detected in Florida in 2005, the state's citrus acreage has collapsed. Fewer groves means fewer blossoms, and fewer blossoms means less orange blossom honey every single year. That one's fading out. The next one is the opposite of everything you've heard so far, and it has a clinical trial behind it. Number 6. Buckwheat Honey. Number 6 is buckwheat honey, and it doesn't look like honey. It's nearly black in the jar, opaque at the edges, and it tastes the way it looks. Malty and earthy, with a molasses edge and a finish some people describe as barnyard. It is not subtle, and it is not for everyone. Buckwheat isn't wheat. It isn't even a grass. It's a broadleaf plant related to rhubarb and sorrel, grown across New York, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota, and its small white flowers give a short, heavy nectar flow that bees work hard while it lasts. In the kitchen, it behaves more like molasses than honey. It's the one for barbecue glazes, gingerbread, and dark rye, anything with enough backbone to stand up to it. And here's the fact that earns it a spot. In December of 2007, researchers at Penn State College of Medicine published a study in the Archives of Pediatrics and Adolescent Medicine. 105 children with nighttime coughs were given either buckwheat honey, dextromethorphan, which is the standard over-the-counter cough suppressant, or nothing at all. Buckwheat honey outperformed both. Remember this next part because the list comes back to it at the very end. That effect doesn't come from the bee. Buckwheat's dark color and its antioxidant load come from phenolic compounds in the plant's own nectar. The bee simply passes them through. The plant writes the chemistry, the bee is the delivery system. At number 1, that exact principle is why a single jar of honey can cost more than $200. Buckwheat is the darkest honey on this list. The next one is so pale you can read a newspaper through the jar. Number 5. Acacia Honey. Number 5 is Acacia Honey, which, despite the name, has nothing to do with acacia trees. It comes from the black locust, Robinia pseudoacacia, and it's the palest honey in commercial production, nearly water clear, with a light vanilla sweetness and almost no aftertaste at all. The tree is native to North America, to the Appalachians and the Ozarks, but the honey story is European. Around the year 1601, a gardener to the French king named Jean Robin received seed from the American colonies and raised black locust in Paris, the first of its kind grown on European soil. Botanists later named the entire genus after him, which is why the tree still carries his name today. It spread across the continent from there and was planted heavily across Hungary in the 1700s to hold sandy soil in place. Hungary is now the leading producer of Acacia honey in Europe. An American tree became a Central European specialty. Its culinary function is the thing people actually buy it for. It stays liquid. Crystallization in honey is driven by glucose, and acacia has an unusually high fructose to glucose ratio. Low glucose means a jar can sit in the pantry for a year or more without turning grainy. It also dissolves instantly in cold liquid, which is why it's the default for iced tea and cocktails. That same profile makes it the mildest honey in wide production, the one to reach for when you want sweetness with no honey flavor attached at all. Acacia resists crystallizing. The next honey on this list never crystallizes at all, and it comes from a single river. Number 4. Tupelo Honey. Number 4 is Tupelo Honey, and it really does come from one river, not one region, one river system. The white Ogeechee Tupelo tree grows in the swamps of the Apalachicola River Basin in the Florida Panhandle and a narrow band of southern Georgia, and essentially nowhere else in commercial quantity. It's pale gold with a faint green cast, buttery on the tongue, with a distinct pear note and a soft, slow finish. The harvest is brutal. The bloom lasts 2 to 3 weeks in April and May. The trees stand in standing water, so beekeepers float hives out on barges and set them on raised platforms in the swamp. Before the bloom starts, they strip the hives of every other honey so nothing contaminates the crop. When the bloom ends, they pull it immediately, and it never granulates. Tupelo has the highest fructose to glucose ratio of any honey in production, higher even than acacia, which means a jar can sit for years and stay perfectly liquid. It's also the only honey on this list with an Academy Award nomination attached to it. Van Morrison named a 1971 album after it. Then, in 1997, the film Uli's Gold put Peter Fonda on screen as a Tupelo beekeeper and earned him a Best Actor nomination. Demand jumped, and ever since, Tupelo has been one of the most counterfeited honeys in the United States. Genuine Tupelo is often verified by pollen analysis under a microscope. That one gets faked. The next one is a honey nobody would ever bother faking because it can put a person in the hospital. Number 3. Mad Honey. Number 3 is Mad Honey. Reddish, thin, slightly bitter, with a sharp burn at the back of the throat. It is the only honey on this list that comes with a dose limit. It's made from rhododendron nectar, specifically rhododendron ponticum and rhododendron luteum, harvested in the mountains along Turkey's Black Sea coast, where it's called Delhi Bal, and in the Himalayan foothills of Nepal. That nectar carries compounds called grayanotoxins, which act on sodium channels in the nervous system. A small amount produces warmth and lightheadedness. A large amount drops blood pressure and slows the heart. This is one of the oldest documented food incidents in Western history. In 401 BC, the Greek soldier and historian Xenophon recorded his retreating army eating local honey near Trabzon on the Black Sea coast and collapsing. Thousands of men were down for roughly a day, then back on their feet. 3 centuries later, forces allied with King Mithridates reportedly left combs of the same honey along the path of Pompey's advancing Roman troops and attacked once they'd eaten. In Nepal, it's still harvested by Gurung honey hunters, who descend hand-woven rope ladders down open cliff faces to reach the nests of Apis laboriosa, the largest honeybee in the world, which builds its combs on bare rock. And notice the pattern from number 6 holding. The bee here is doing nothing unusual at all. The plant is. That honey is dangerous. The next one is simply unreachable, and it holds a Guinness World Record. Number 2. Turkish Cave Honey. Number 2 is Turkish Cave Honey, sold under the name Centauri and produced in the same Black Sea highlands as the Mad Honey we just covered. It isn't harvested from hives at all. Wild colonies build comb inside caves and rock formations roughly 2,500 meters above sea level, deliberately far from human settlements and from any other bee colony. Reaching it means rope descent with full climbing equipment. The honey is dark, dense, and genuinely bitter, closer to an herbal extract than a sweetener. It's eaten by the spoonful and never cooked. Total annual production is somewhere between 10 and 15 kilograms. Not tons, kilograms. There's no way to scale it because the caves produce what the caves produce, and the harvest happens once a year. On the 16th of February, 2021, Guinness World Records certified it as the most expensive honey ever sold at 10,000 euros per kilogram. That works out to roughly $5,400 a pound. At that price, it stops functioning as food in any practical sense. It's a collector's item that happens to be edible. That's the rarest honey on earth. But the most valuable honey in the world isn't rare at all, and that is exactly the problem. Number 1. Manuka Honey. Number 1 is Manuka Honey. It's thick, closer to an ointment than a syrup, somewhere between dark cream and brown, and it tastes mineral and faintly medicinal with a bitter finish. By ordinary honey standards, it isn't especially pleasant. That has never been the point. It comes from the Manuka bush, Leptospermum sciparium, a scrubby, unglamorous plant that grows wild across New Zealand and parts of Australia and flowers for a window of only 2 to 8 weeks a year. The hives are often set in country rough enough that they have to be flown in by helicopter. And now remember buckwheat, back at number 6. The plant writes the chemistry and the bee just delivers it. Manuka is the most extreme case of that on Earth. Manuka nectar contains a compound called dihydroxyacetone. As the honey sits and matures in the jar, that compound converts into methylglyoxal, or MgO, and that is what gives Manuka its antibacterial activity. The bee can't manufacture it and can't remove it. Every dollar of Manuka's price traces back to something the bush put into the nectar before a bee ever arrived. Because that compound is measurable, Manuka is the only honey on Earth routinely sold with a number printed on the label. UMF and MgO ratings grade the concentration and the price scales directly with it. Supermarket jars start around $30 and top grades run past $200. And here's the number this whole list has been building toward. New Zealand produces roughly 1,700 tons of Manuka honey a year. Industry estimates put global sales of honey labeled Manuka at around 10,000 tons, which means most of what the world buys as Manuka is not Manuka. New Zealand's government eventually stepped in. In December of 2017, the Ministry for Primary Industries finalized a scientific definition of the honey. 4 chemical markers from Manuka nectar, plus a DNA marker from Manuka pollen. Since then, no honey can legally leave New Zealand labeled Manuka until an approved lab confirms all 5, which makes Manuka the only honey in the world that has to pass a government lab test to prove that it's itself. Comment if we missed a honey that you think should have been on this list, and why. Subscribe for more explanations of foods and beverages, and we'll see you on the next one.